Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Google's countdown to the election. I am so excited to be joined by our esteemed guest this afternoon, California Secretary of State Alex Padilla. He's a native of the San Fernando Valley. Formerly, he served as the president of NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected
Alex Padilla. He's a
Officials.
native of the San Fernando Valley.
I can hear
Formerly,
myself
he served
talking.
as the president of NALEO, the National
Having two screens open at once. It happens all the time, huh? He's also served as a California state senator and the LA City Council president. During his time in public service, he's always been committed to modernizing his offices. And he's the perfect person for us to kick off our discussion this afternoon about digital and tools, and also celebrate National Voter Registration Day. So thanks so much for joining us. Cue the applause.
Thank you. The virtual applause.
Absolutely. So, Secretary, often we see that the public sector is the last to adopt digital best practices. What advice do you give to your fellow politicians and their staff about establishing their presence online?
It's I guess a unique space for me on the side of elected officials, right? Because I think I bring a unique background and perspective to all this, not just my upbringing, my parents, et cetera, but I'm one of the few engineers in elected office. I'm not a coder, not a programmer, but at least enough of a technical proficiency to keep up with innovation and changing technologies. So whether it's everything from election security, which is a big deal in my day job right now, to how we utilize technology to better connect with our constituents and the general public, I think has been important. And so what do I advise my colleagues? To not be afraid, not be intimidated. There's a lot of folks that are at the ready to assist them because it is critical, right? It's not just informing ourselves on a lot of the public policy debates that are driven by technology, like privacy and data security, et cetera, but it's part of our fundamental fulfillment of our responsibility to continue to stay accountable and available to our constituents. So, door to door is one thing, releasing, press statements is another, but making sure that we're active in the social media world and using the entire digital toolkit to stay connected. I think that's fundamental to our democracy.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Making sure that people are engaged, but then also making sure that people are doing it in a safe manner. It's ever more important, especially as we get closer and closer towards November, to make sure that our data is safe and things like that. So
Right.
What do you consider to really be good digital hygiene for political organizations?
Yeah, well, I think elections is a perfect example. It's not just a secure from an infrastructure standpoint, right? That runs the gamut, whether you're in finance, whether you're in utility world, whether, wherever you are, security of your digital footprint is important. But so is awareness of misinformation and disinformation online, right? Probably no better example than a lot of the misleading information that we find, unfortunately, about elections and registering to vote, et cetera. So when it comes to a digital hygiene standpoint, I think elections is a pretty good example. The elections world has come a long way in the last 4 years through, number one, collaboration, right? Not being insular. We've got a partner, not just with IT professionals in our own shop, but throughout state government, federal, local agencies, public and private. We all have a vested interest in sharing best practices and case studies and to learn from each other and to not be shy about constantly upping our game. But even if we had the best and state-of-the-art encryption technology and firewalls and everything else, it's all for naught when you have that one employee in your system or that one well-intentioned friend, clicking on a link from a long-lost relative that won the lottery in Africa, trying to transfer you money, right? So cyber hygiene includes constant training and refreshing of what to do and what not to do online.
Absolutely. I think you might have seen our deck. I feel like you're just giving all the talking points. That hygiene is really important, and really you are only as strong as your weakest link. So if one person in your organization, unfortunately, clicks on that link to send money to the Nigerian prince, that's not the best, but it's something we all hope that we can avoid, avoiding phishing, avoiding scams, things like that.
Right.
So I want to ask you a little bit about communicators, because a lot of the folks on the chat today, they are communicators. They work for folks in public service, just like yourself. And I'm wondering, how folks in government and campaigns, they tend to juggle a lot of different platforms, a lot of different pieces of public officials' digital presence. So what skills do you recommend that communicators prioritize?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's a long list, frankly, and I think I'm blessed in my level to have good people as part of my team. So I'm constantly mindful of, okay, through my official office, what am I saying? How am I saying it? Where am I saying it on a daily basis? But maybe more frequent than that because there's a lot going on constantly. And then on the non-state side, right, through my political team, what am I saying? How am I saying it? Where am I saying it? Et cetera. And so there's a lot of depending on your situation, there's people with less support, but still need to maintain that presence. And so whether it's frequency, which platforms, tips and tools, the most important thing of all, I think, is frankly, just authenticity. It's not just in the political space. I think that's good life advice. It's one thing to retweet or share what other people are saying or doing, or to make a comment here. It's a little maybe outside the comfort zone, but we really got to stop being driven by what we think people want to hear, and just being true to ourselves, have our true voice, because that's what people respond to, right? If you're trying to build your presence and your following, people know when you're faking it. And so kind of be yourself. And I think that resonates even amongst people who may disagree from time to time. So authenticity above all.
Absolutely. That's something that's so critical to all of, online presence, and really making sure that people are hearing exactly who you are. And how are some ways that you're able to kind of show that authentic side of yourself?
Again, I think it's a part of how I script it. Just me being who I am. I would try not to be too technical, try not to use other people's jargon. I think probably it's worked well for me in my many years of public service, trying to simplify the message and the language that I use. And frankly, I also try to mix it up. If you look at my personal social media pages, yes, it's a lot of the official information, a new bill that got passed or tools for voters, et cetera, but a good dose of occasional something I find interesting in science and engineering, or a family post, or, my favorite sports teams, things like that. Even an occasional recipe that we make at home, because my wife and I love cooking. So, kind of mix it up. Politicians are people too, and people deserve to see the human side of who we are.
That is 100% true. And, it's really great to kind of hear that side, especially for all the folks listening as well. Just getting a flavor of who you are, and, what you bring to the table, not only as, a public servant, but then also as a person. I think that that's something that we should strive for with all of our public officials, and, kind of, getting that recipe, all those kind of things. That's fun. That's what life's about. So it's exciting.
Right. And I guess, one of my COVID stories, as many people have, it only took about 5 months, but it finally happened, where I got Zoom bombed by one of my kids while I was recording a news interview. So in the heat of explaining some detailed election security stuff with a local NBC affiliate in the Bay Area, here comes my 7-year-old walking in. So happens to the best of us, but hey, it's the world that we're living in, and we can certainly relate. There's a lot of pain and suffering out there. So let's keep life in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you mentioned, so first, getting Zoom bombed is hilarious.
Happens to the best of us.
I know. I will say we are on a secure platform, so nobody's coming in to bomb our conversation today. But one of those, what's your favorite recipe that you've done during COVID? I've tried to become an amateur chef. My boyfriend has loved it, but I haven't been that great at cooking. So, what advice do you have for cooking your favorite recipe?
Well, right now is the time to experiment, right? Because a lot of us are home a lot more than we have been in the past. So put that time to work. I'm just a fan. My wife and I are just fans of, we think of a dish we'd like to make, and, Google a recipe, and then tweak it. Don't think you have to stick rigid to whatever recipe you come across. Make it your own. Substitute turkey for beef, or add some spices, or whatever comes to mind. That's the fun of it, and how we learn. But during COVID, look, right now we find ourselves in Hatch chili season. I'm not from New Mexico, but I'm a fan of the Hatch chili. And so whenever I can get my hands on the stash, we try to do it the old school way. Throw it on the grill to kind of roast it, blister it, and then peel that skin off, take the seeds and the stems out, and start dicing, sauteing with a little garlic, a little salt, and it goes with everything. So it's not available year round, so we try to make the most of it when it's in stock.
That sounds delicious. Gotta get some for football Sunday. I'm
Right?
about. So another question for you. How have you really utilized technology to connect with your constituents during the past 6 months?
Right. So, I mean, I think it's frankly building on a lot of what we've had in place before. I try to, like other good political figures, right? You have your social media pages, and you're trying to build your following, and you're communicating regularly, not too frequent, but not too infrequent. Email updates, etc. I think the toughest part for elected officials, since we're so used to pressing the flesh, if you will, being out and about at events. I miss the giving a speech, whether it's at a rally in a park, or in a hotel ballroom for a more formal event, and feeding off the energy of the people that you're interacting with. It's tough to do during quarantine. And so we've done a lot of this. I mentioned getting Zoom bombed. You name it, we have the platform, whether it's StreamYard or Skype or Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting, and on and on and on. But to the extent that we're utilizing these to stay connected and continue to put out important information, initially it was just COVID updates, but now it's don't forget to register, don't forget to vote, don't forget to fill out the census. As much pain and struggling as there is out there, kind of life is going on. There's important things happening on a daily basis. And, I never imagined I'd be able to cover an audience in San Diego and Sacramento and San Francisco and Los Angeles all the same day, right? Travel makes it prohibitive, but, with these online platforms, I can do it and be home in time for dinner. So
Absolutely.
in some ways, it's made that a little bit easier.
Today you're talking to people from all across America. We're all in different time zones, which it makes it really cool. But that energy is something you just can't replace in person.
Right. So we'll use this as best we can, and I have a hunch that even when once there is a vaccine and we're able to transition to what the new normal is going to be, there's going to be a lot more work from home and online events. Not everybody's going to go back to the in-person stuff the way it was before. If it leads to a better work-life balance, then maybe that's a silver lining that comes out of all of this. Homeschooling, though, has been no joke.
I give a lot of props to all the parents out there. That is for sure.
Yep.
So one last question before we talk about National Voter Registration Day. On numerous occasions, you've really committed to modernizing your office and other entities that you touch across government. How can we as citizens and as a government be ready for the technology of the future?
Yeah. So I think being mindful of it, and frankly engaging with the technology community. Right. One of the things I learned early on in my career is nobody has all the answers. Right. If you want to, make change in the world, government doesn't do it alone. The private sector doesn't do it alone. The nonprofit world doesn't do it alone. Academia doesn't do it alone. Media doesn't do it alone. We all are interconnected and have to learn from each other. And so when it comes to addressing technology issues and challenges, we shouldn't be afraid of bringing the experts in. And even if we disagree from time to time, it's important to have that perspective and context for some decision making. So for those of you wondering how you can get involved, it's not just as a voter. It starts with being a voter, but beyond that, you can be an advocate, or you can be a resource for policymakers. You don't always have to run for office, although if you're interested, you could and should do that. But a lot of ways to weigh in, to influence not just program, but fundamental public policy.
Absolutely. Staying involved, especially, folks on the call who are in public service themselves, really making sure we're going that extra mile. So, of course, today is National Voter Registration Day, and I would be absolutely remiss if I did not ask a Secretary of State why it is so important to be registered to vote.
All right. Well, if in case you haven't heard, we have a big election coming up this November.
November
You
3rd.
have to be living under a rock if you didn't know that by now. And I think coming into 2020, we knew this would be the most consequential election of our lifetime, and that was before the COVID-19 impact from a health perspective and an economic perspective really has turned our world upside down. We knew it even before, the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the social justice movement that has prompted. Before the passing of some true heroes along the way, from Congressman John Lewis earlier this summer to Justice Ginsburg this last Friday, wildfires in California specifically and other parts of the West, it seems like 2020 just keeps on giving us reasons to register and vote this November, because that's how we have our voice heard in our democracy. I guess the simplest way to explain it is, let's just transport ourselves back to high school government class, right? We live in a representative democracy. There's people making important decisions on our behalf at all levels of government. And how do those representatives get their jobs? They're elected, not just by the people generally, and not just by citizens, not just by people who are eligible to vote, specifically by people who are eligible and register and vote. Right? You can be eligible, but if you're not registered, or you can be registered, but if you don't vote, your voice is not heard in the process. And it's not just about our representatives. By extension, it's, what becomes the policy priorities and the budget priorities for our federal government, our state government, our local government. No shortage of issues to care about, which means every level of government is important. Every election matters, and your vote matters especially.
Absolutely. What a better way to end our remarks today on, Secretary, I'm so happy that you could join us on our countdown to the election. We have a lot of cool things lined up, but starting off with just chatting with you has been an absolute highlight. And we thank you so much for joining us, giving us your perspective on digital, on voting, everything in between.
Hey, one last plug if I can, because it's another example of utilizing technology to fill a need. COVID has impacted not just how we're going to vote, hopefully more vote by mail, early voting, that sort of thing, but even how counties across the country can provide the in-person voting opportunities. A lot of seniors and retirees that have served as poll workers in the past are not available this November. And so the great folks at powerthepolls.org have created a national platform for people who are interested in signing up to serve as poll workers. You plug in your information and we'll get you connected with your local elections officials to provide training, PPE, and your stipend for your service. So great example and a great need.
Well, you heard it here first. So thank you so much, Secretary. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for all of your imparting wisdom.
All right. Stay safe, everybody. And don't forget to vote.
You too. Thanks. All right. Now we're going to transition, and we are going to hear from Congressman Will Hurd. Hello, Congressman. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Maria. No problem. It's great to be on with you.
Amazing. Well, of course, I'll give you a little bit of an intro, but we know that you need no introduction. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Will Hurd, who represents Texas's 23rd District on Capitol Hill. He's no stranger to technology and cybersecurity. He spent much of his career as an undercover officer in the CIA until he realized that his expertise in cybersecurity and intelligence was sorely needed in Congress. He is also known to visit a Dairy Queen or two from time to time. So Congressman, thanks so much for joining me today. I know you heard some of the remarks from Secretary Alex Padilla. We're going to talk about some of the similar things that we talked about with the Secretary, but I'm so happy to have you on today. We're counting down to the election. It's National Voter Registration Day. I couldn't think of a more perfect day and a more perfect person to talk with me about some of these things.
Well, first off, like Secretary Padilla said, register to vote and then go out and actually vote. I think those are such critical things. And if you're not registered, go find somebody who isn't and make sure that they are registered. And fill out your census form. If you haven't done that already, you can do that online too. So I know most of y'all sitting at home, check off those honeydews and register. And even in a lot of states, you're already being able to request an absentee ballot. And if you live in one of those states where you can request one, then go and do that as well while you're sitting in front of your computer.
Absolutely. Today is the day if you haven't done it. I think you have 8 days to fill out the census or so. So all these things are coming at you right before November. So Congressman, often the public sector is the last to adopt digital best practices. What advice do you give to your fellow politicians and their staff about establishing their presence online?
Well, first is claim your presence online, right? That is something that's unique to Google, where you want to make sure that you actually capture that digital space in order to, when somebody searches your name, you want your name and your actual official website to be at the top of that stack. I think it's a great service that is provided, and also it helps deal with disinformation. So step one, make sure you claim your presence online. Two, you.
Okay.
We're getting into the basics, right? We're getting into the basics. No, honestly, and one of the things that I try to do also is tell small businesses the same thing. I love coffee, and my district's 29 counties. It takes 10 and a half hours to drive from one side of my district to the other at 80 miles an hour. It takes 10 and a half hours, and it's 80 is a speed limit in most of the district, to be frank. And a lot of times there's some of these restaurants that aren't that haven't signed up and haven't taken their presence on Google. And so if I'm on the map and just search coffee, they don't pop up. So this is something that I preach to everybody, because when I'm in a small town, I want to make sure I get to the coolest coffee shop. So that's something that works for politicians, people running for office, but also small businesses as well. So that's the first step. Second step is you got to think of each one of these as different channels, right? A lot of folks want to put the same thing on each one of their channels. That's not the case. Make sure you understand and know who the people you are talking to. I also try to make sure people realize, yes, look, my digital footprint would be larger if I said crazy things, right? But I'm not a bomb thrower, and so I try to be thoughtful and nuanced. Shocker, I know that's sometimes not in vogue in this day and age, but that's something about being true and authentic. And one thing that I'm trying to do now, look, I think everybody is they recognize the value of this kind of digital conversation. But if you're producing videos, make sure you put something more in it now, right? We should be able to be multimedia. I just recorded a commencement speech for a local university, and I used a Rocky Balboa clip. This is the movie from 2006. I don't want to give it away because they haven't played it yet. But making sure that you think about this as a mechanism that you got to make sure you use all the tools at your fingertips, which means you got to have someone that actually understands digital in your office. So those are a lot of things. Also, I have found, to be frank, right now, surveys, email surveys have been incredibly, the response rate that we're getting to that is quite fantastic. And I'm learning new insights. It may be on whatever topic we're going to vote on next week in Congress, or whatever the latest major thing that's happening in the news. It's interesting to get people's immediate feedback on that. A lot of folks in front of their devices, and I'm seeing people filling those things out on their Gmail a lot more than they did a couple of months ago.
That's great. Congressman, well, you heard it straight from the congressman. Make sure to claim your knowledge panel, claim your presence on search, and claim your Google My Business profile, which I know that Eric and Andrea will cover a little bit later in our presentation. But Congressman, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, if you're a small business owner and you're paying attention, you don't know that. Like, it's literally, I know about this because I attended one of y'all's put me on the map, I think is what was, or find me on the map, or put me on the map, one of these presentations, and we did it for a lot of small businesses throughout my community, and they found it to be pretty fascinating.
Which is amazing. And, all of those little things actually make a huge difference online, whether that's a coffee shop, ice cream shop, or, government officials, members of Congress, offices in the district, things like that. It all really adds up, for folks. And I know there's a lot of communicators on the line, so it's really great for them to hear that as well. So I want to kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about COVID. Of course, it's been a long 6 months for a lot of us, and I'm wondering how you've utilized technology to connect with your constituents, with folks even on the Hill and others during this time. How have you connected through technology?
Well, my operations haven't changed, right? I have 29 counties. San Antonio, my hometown where I lived, has been dealing with COVID since the third week in January. There was 91 U.S. citizens in Wuhan, China, that were expatriated back to the United States, and they came to Lackland Air Force Base for quarantining. And then one of the big cruise ships. We had a bunch of people right after that. And so San Antonio has been on the front line of dealing with this for some time. And so my operations as an office hasn't changed. We still, take meetings, even though now they're on Zoom. I have found that my office, we communicate a little bit more because we're forced to call each other and talk to each other. Sometimes you ignore the person sitting right next to you. And so that has forced us to improve and overshare. That's kind of been one of the key tenets in our office is make sure that we're oversharing. I wish everybody had more digital skills. How do you edit videos? How do you put videos together? How do you incorporate those kinds of things? I think that is such a critical skill set. And if you are a communicator on this call and you don't know these things, figure it out, right? This is the 21st century. You should have already had those skills. And it's really even more important to be able to communicate within this little box and how you do that, right? And so our operations haven't changed. But here's what I have seen the problem. We have learned that digital infrastructure is as outdated as our physical infrastructure. And that has prevented us from truly going to a digital democracy or true digital operations. In my hometown, there's a school district, one of the fourth largest in the state of Texas. When school came back online, 31% of the kids weren't able to access their classroom. That means that system wasn't stress tested. Was that system good enough? When unemployment was at an all-time high and Congress passed additional unemployment benefits, that $600 check, most unemployment agencies across the country weren't able to administer that additional money in a quick way because they didn't have the digital infrastructure. Some of these places didn't even have an 800 number, right, where somebody can call. And so how do we make sure that we're modernizing that infrastructure and it's stuff as basic as, do you have access to Wi-Fi, right? Do you have the databases necessary to leverage these things? So this is where, when I was in the Hindu Kush Mountains thinking about running for Congress, I never would have thought I would be the IT procurement guy, right? But I've learned really quickly, if you don't have the infrastructure to take advantage of all these great tools that sit on top of the infrastructure, then you can't get things done. And so that is one of the things I think COVID has made us realize is that our digital infrastructure, when we talk about infrastructure, that means digital infrastructure, not just bridges, roads, locks, and dams any longer. And so that has been something that I've spent a lot of my time on in trying to make sure that we have that digital infrastructure in the future. Oh, and by the way, when you do that, you increase your surface area of attack, right? That means folks trying to do us harm, other nation states are trying to take advantage of that increased digital footprint. So we have to begin with security in mind in a lot of these tools. And it's not just our laptops or our phones. It's also our Fitbits and your smart, your smart lights and everything like that, the Internet of Things. And so how do we make sure that we're protecting against those attacks is super important as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, and by the way, step one to do that, have a password more than 14 characters, okay? And make sure all your software is patched. So claim your presence online, make sure you have a 14-character password, and make sure all your software on your device is up to date. You do those three things, you'll be okay.
I love that. I told everybody that we were going to have, that pre-election checklist, 1, 2, and 3 right there, everybody. It's really great to hear about how we can be doing these things, especially as these things hopefully, cross my fingers, modernize, both in government and beyond. And then, of course, as we go on and expand our footprints, not only personally, but just as a nation and a globe. So all these things are super important. I know we're running low on time, so
Sure.
of course, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you if you've been to a Dairy Queen during COVID. I love the tour that you did. It's been one of my favorite things to point to, just something fun, lighthearted that, members have done. And of course, that's something that you did. So tell the people, have you been?
So for those that don't know, so in a district as big as large as mine, one of the things that I've learned is you got to be out in the community. I have a county. It's the second least populated county in the United States of America. The entire county only has 95 people, and it's larger, probably than most places. And I've been there a bunch of times. And I do a trip, I call it DC to DQ, where I hit the Dairy Queens. I hit about 35 Dairy Queens in 4 or 5 days and do town halls at the Dairy Queen. And the good thing about Dairy Queen and all these communities is they only got one, so you don't have to tell everybody where to go. So you get to save, space on your flyer. And also, who doesn't like to start an event with a cool treat on a hot day, right? And so it's just something that a method to get out and talk to folks. And I think Secretary Padilla was talking earlier. One of the things that's hard is not getting that feedback, that in-person feedback. And it's a different scenario when you're doing it on things like this. But that's one of the things I missed. And I have been at Dairy Queen, Texas. We have some of our restaurants and small businesses open. So I've been glad to go and support our small businesses. They're having a really tough time. And, making sure I'm going out there and helping them as much as I can is one of the things I try to do.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Congressman. I promised Amy that I'd have you off.
Yeah. So the one of the problems in this digital environment is that you're actually programmed a little bit too much, right? And so usually, if you have people waiting in the office, someone's late. Now, when the next person's just waiting on the next tab on Google Chrome, you gotta get off on time. So this is important. And again, to reiterate what Secretary Padilla said: register to vote, then go vote, fill out your census form, claim your persona and your presence online, and have a 14-character password. You do all those things, you're gonna have a really good day.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Congressman. We appreciate it so much. We'll see you soon.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Well, we heard from some wonderful speakers, but it's not over yet. Secretary Alex Padilla, Congressman Will Hurd, thank you so much. Now we're going to shift gears and we're going to hear a presentation about a lot of the tools that you've actually already heard about from some of our guest speakers, from two of my colleagues, Erica and Andrea. And I will kick it over to them for a training on the U.S. elections.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria. And thanks again to Secretary Padilla and Congressman Will Hurd for that exciting interview. And now to get into it, Erica and I are going to talk about a handful of things today to make sure that you are good to go ahead of the elections. So first, I want to talk about managing your presence on search, as Congressman Will Hurd said. And then we'll go into some basics about getting set up on YouTube. And then finally, I'll kick it over to Erica to talk about how you can protect your organization online. Great. So the first one, managing your presence on search. I'm going to talk today about claiming and suggesting edits to your knowledge panel. If you've heard one of these webinars before, I am sure you have heard about the knowledge panel before, but we really just want to drive this point home. So this is what a typical search query looks like today in Google. You're going to have search query at the top. You may have ads running with the query. Under that, you're going to have the news section and then organic results. And then there may be a knowledge panel. So knowledge panels are dedicated information boxes of high-profile entities for whom we have enough information about from the web. They appear on the top right side of a desktop search and at the very top of a mobile search. They're designed to give our users as accurate and authoritative information as possible. So who better to make sure that information is accurate than the entity themselves? So what you can do as a verified representative of your entity, if your entity does have a knowledge panel, is you can actually claim that knowledge panel and make sure you own your presence that is so high up in Google search. And you can make sure all the information is as accurate and up to date as possible. So for those of you who have knowledge panels, you can go ahead by searching for your knowledge panel in Google search. And then what you'll do is you'll go through the claiming process. It only takes a few minutes. You just want to make sure you sign into the Google account you want to own the panel. Oftentimes in an office, you will see that that's a shared account. You don't want to claim a knowledge panel with your personal Google account. You want to make sure the whole office can access that knowledge panel. So claim it with a shared account, find your knowledge panel, and then you'll go through our really quick and easy verification process. There's going to be a little box at the bottom of your knowledge panel that says claim this knowledge panel. And from there, you'll go through our verification process. Once you have claimed your knowledge panel, you can actually suggest edits to the knowledge panel itself. We say suggest edits rather than edit directly because, say, a politician is 5'9", they can't say they're 6 feet. We just want to make sure that information is as accurate as possible. So you'll sign into that account that you use to claim the knowledge panel, and then you can suggest edits using the interface with those little pencil buttons. Some pretty common edits we see to the knowledge panel for civic entities are updating that headshot, maybe adding educational experience, and updating or adding social profiles to the knowledge panel itself. Here are some resource links for knowledge panels, and we have a whole help center should you have any questions on claiming or suggesting edits to that knowledge panel. Great. Moving on, I want to talk about getting set up on YouTube. First, some basics about what YouTube looks like today, how you can make sure that your presence looks good, and then specifically utilizing YouTube Live to connect with your audience. So YouTube is a really great way to reach your audience where they are. 2 billion people are actually logged into YouTube globally a month. And more than that, more specifically, 220 million Americans use YouTube to watch video content. And global watch time of authoritative news content has grown by 70% in the first 3 months of 2020. So more than ever before, especially in the time of COVID-19, utilizing YouTube to reach your audience virtually is important now more than ever. So when you go to YouTube, you want to make sure that you have set up your YouTube channel correctly. You want to make sure that you can get your channel verified and get yourself a custom URL. So you can email us at civics-outreach@google.com for a verification badge and getting set up with that custom URL. So now that your channel is set up, there are a whole host of ways you can use YouTube to reach your audience. Live streams are a really great way to do that. A great feature about live streams is that they're typically ranked higher in results due to their immediate nature. So it's a great way to make sure people are going to see the content that you're posting if it's live. So there are a few ways that we've seen civic leaders use YouTube Live to reach their audience. The first is through live events. So if you already have an event going on or you already have a PSA that you have planned, you can make sure if you live stream it, that's a great way to provide your audience with real-time engagement. Another option we've seen people do is expert interviews. So you can bring on a subject matter expert to respond to some frequently asked questions that your organization or your office is getting, and they can provide some unique insights in real time. And then a third option that we've seen folks utilizing to engage with their folks on YouTube Live is doing a town hall Q&A. I know a lot of people can't have in-person town halls these days, so doing a YouTube Live one is a great way to supplement that experience. You can request questions from your audience beforehand and in real time, so your principal is still getting that back and forth with their constituents and with their audience as they go. So the next thing is you're going to want to enable YouTube Live to get started. So you'll log into your YouTube channel and you just want to make sure you enable live streaming 24 hours before your live event. Great. Here is a quick checklist we suggest folks run through pre, during, and post-production. Some of the nuts and bolts to make sure you do before the live event is to make sure you test your full setup. As we know, there can be many technical difficulties online, so testing your full setup is just a great way to mitigate any of those issues that you might have. During the event, you want to make sure you stick to a structured agenda and request questions from the audience throughout the programming. And then post-event, you want to make sure you publish your live stream to your channel so people can watch it on demand for those of your audience who aren't able to watch it in real time. Great. And we actually have a full live guide specifically for civic engagement. You can find this live guide on our website, g.co/civics resources. And so finally, last but not least, if you are putting in all the work to make content on your channel, you want to make sure you're promoting all the work that you're doing. So some tips to promote your videos are by publicizing both your channel and new videos to your other social media platforms. Make sure you link your channel in your websites, in your email signatures, put your channel on your business cards. Just make sure you're constantly promoting your channel in any way, shape, or form you can. Finally, make sure you allow embedding on your videos so other people can distribute your videos for you. And we have a whole host of tips and best practices for YouTube, again, on our website. That's just g.co/civics resources. And with that, that are some of our tips and tricks for utilizing YouTube to connect with your audience. And I am going to pass it over to my colleague, Erica, to talk about security.
That mute button can sometimes be very tricky to find. No, but thank you so much. Those were great tips and tricks, Andrea. Definitely claim your knowledge panel. Definitely get your YouTube channel verified. civics-outreach@google.com. So today we're going to talk a little bit about safety and security. And the number one thing that we hope you remember is to secure your accounts. So the best way to protect your organization is by creating a culture of security. And this starts by taking responsibility for the data that you have and you own. The most action item, the most actionable step that you can take is to keep yourself accountable and help keep your whole organization safe and protected is to secure your accounts. So these are the Google built-in protections, and we're just going to go over those really quickly, and these are available to anybody. The first is Security Checkup. That is a step-by-step tool that helps protect the security of your Google account with personalized recommendations. You can manage which third-party apps have access to your account data, check your saved passwords, and more. It also shows any recent security events from the last 28 days. So if anybody were to try to log into your account or anything like that, it would show up in that g.co/security checkup. And you should just have a calendar reminder every 28 days to go through, check that out, make sure that you are familiar and comfortable with all of those attempts. And all of that, again, is available at g.co/security checkup. The next is Privacy Checkup. And that is another way we help keep your data private, safe, and secure. It helps you choose your privacy settings, also step by step. In just a few minutes, you can control what data is used to personalize your experience across Google services. It's easy to change your privacy settings at any time. It takes just a few minutes, and that is available at g.co/privacy-checkup. The next is password checkup and password manager. So to give you peace of mind that the passwords you've saved are secure, we recently launched password checkup, and that'll scan your saved passwords and notify you if any have been compromised. Definitely make sure that you have that enabled. And then password manager. So as I'm sure you know, and as Congressman Hurd also touched on, passwords continue to be a major vulnerability when it comes to online privacy. So 66% of people use the same password for more than one account, which only increases the risk that that personal information will be compromised. To help, we built our password manager directly into Chrome, so you don't have to use a third-party app. You don't have to give anybody any access, and that will enable you to easily create and save strong passwords. This syncs to your Google account so that you can manage all of your saved passwords in one place. Both the password checkup and password manager are available at passwords.google.com. That being said, these built-in protection and tools are not enough to protect you from sophisticated, targeted, highly malicious digital attacks. So even the savviest users, for example, the CEO of Twitter was successfully phished. So how can you protect yourself and your organization? The best and first thing is two-step verification. With your Google account, you can choose the level of account security with easy controls. Passwords are only the first line of defense. So even if you do have a very strong 14-character password, uppercase, lowercase, doesn't mean anything. Without that two-step verification, you do not have that extra layer of security. So it's a form of strong authentication that requires more than just your username or password when you sign into your account. So a 6-digit code sent to your phone, a code generated by an authenticator app. That being said, recently we have seen attackers become more sophisticated, and they have been able to intercept those codes in an attempt to phish users. So for the strongest form of two-step verification, we highly recommend physical security keys. So let's take a closer look at those. So security keys are unphishable technology. Even if an attacker does get your password or intercepts that two-step verification code, they will still need your phone or physical security key to access your Google account. In addition to the physical layer of security, security keys verify a user's identity and the sign-in URL. So if you were directed to an imposter sign-in page or something like that, the security key would recognize that it was not the authentic sign-in URL and would not, even if you did enter your personal information, it would not be transmitted to the attacker. You can purchase physical security keys like our Titan security key on the Google Store, or if you are part of a federal campaign, you might be eligible for free keys through our partnership with Defending Digital Campaigns, and we'll touch on that later. You can also activate your phone's built-in security key if you are running iOS 10 or higher or Android 7 or higher, and that is 100% free. If you're interested in that, again, please email civics-outreach@google.com. So in addition to these physical security keys, for users that might have a higher risk of targeted online attacks, like campaign teams, official teams, anybody who's really in the public space, we have created the Advanced Protection Program, and that leverages the powerful phishing-resistant technology of security keys. Advanced Protection provides industry-leading security to protect you across the many ways attackers try to access your account, like phishing and malware. The program is free and only requires a security key. So these protections are added and adapted continually as the threat landscape changes. So as we saw that those 6-digit codes were being intercepted, things like that, our program, the Advanced Protection Program, will adapt to defend you against those attacks. So as we discussed, sophisticated phishing techniques can trick even the savviest users into giving their private sign-in credentials to attackers. So Advanced Protection verifies it's really you by requiring a security key when you sign in. An unauthorized user will not be able to sign in without one of your security keys or your phone, even if they have your username and password. To date, we have successfully thwarted 100% of phishing attempts on accounts enrolled in Advanced Protection. Our council always warns us that if we if we have one effective phishing success on somebody in advanced protection, we will have to change that stat. But our product team and our team as well is so confident that it is the best in class in terms of protecting and securing your account. It also prevents fraudulent access to your data. So when you sign up for new apps or services, you're sometimes asked to give access to data in your Google accounts, your contacts, your location, your calendar, your drive, something that might be a productivity tool or something along those lines. Usually this doesn't pose the risk, but some attackers compromise or impersonate a third-party app or service to gain access to your data. So you might think that you are signing up for something that everybody uses and it poses no threat, but that might not be the case. So advanced protection only allows Google Apps and verified third-party apps to access your Gmail and Google Drive files. Last but not least, it helps block malware. Attackers use many strategies to get users to download harmful software. Google Chrome protects all users against malware, but advanced protection adds even a stronger layer of defense. If you attempt to download a risky file, you'll receive an additional warning, or the download might be blocked if it's known to be a phishing or malware attempt. For Android users, advanced protection also prevents installation of unknown apps sourced outside the Play Store that might be harmful. So if you have G Suite, we highly recommend enrolling that account into APP today. You can enroll at g.co/advanced protection. Many times you might have sensitive information in your personal Gmail as well. So to get full security, you can enroll your personal Gmail. Please reach out to us at civics-outreach@google.com if you would like to enroll with your phone. Otherwise, you can enroll with a physical security key today. As I mentioned, we are proud to partner with the Defending Digital Campaigns to provide eligible campaigns access to free Titan security keys. Again, the strongest form of two-factor authentication. We're working with this bipartisan organization to help make all qualifying campaigns safer and make it easier for people to enroll in our advanced protection program. Last but not least, this is our added security for the election season. So this, if you remember nothing else from what I said today, please go to goo.gle/enhanced-security. So to take your account security to the next level, Google has created a tailored security for political organizations. So this is for anybody who is involved in the election in any capacity. It's different from APP, and we recommend enrolling in it in conjunction to the Advanced Protection Program. Google accounts used for election-related activity are facing specific threats right now, and we are able to identify those threats and protect you from them. So you can request this additional protection from Google using this form. With your consent, the requested accounts will receive additional security checks for active threats and suspicious activity like hacking and phishing. Google may also tailor special protections to address specific threats as they emerge. Whew. Thank you so much. A lot of information. If you have any questions or anything along those lines, please feel free to contact us, civics-outreach@google.com.
I'm muted too. Awesome. Thanks so much, Erica and Andrea, for that delightful presentation. I know I always, keep those tips and tricks in the back of my mind, and I hope that you add them to your pre-election checklist. I know that the secretary and the congressman highlighted some of the things that we had in our presentation, and they didn't even see it before. So you must know that those things are extremely important. So now we're going to move on in our programming, and we're going to move on to our communicators panel, which I'm really delighted for and excited about. So let me welcome our communicators here. Caleb, Colleen, and Ernestine, we're all here. Wonderful. Okay. So of course, we're going to hear from our wonderful panel of digital communicators. I'll give you a brief synopsis of who you're hearing from today, but it's very exciting. I'm thrilled. We have a lot planned for you guys. So first, I'm joined by Ernestine Dawson, the esteemed digital director to Chairman Hakeem Jeffries and the House Democratic Caucus. She previously worked on the Obama 2012 reelect. She's worked at the DNC, Collective PAC, and worked for DC Mayor Muriel Bowser and Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. I'm also joined by Caleb J. Smith, the acclaimed digital director for the House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy. Caleb is no stranger to leadership offices on the Hill. He was also the digital mastermind behind Speaker John Boehner and Speaker Paul Ryan. And last, certainly, but not least, meet Colleen Curtis, the revered digital director to Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York. Throughout her career, she's made stops as an executive editor of Us Weekly, the Huffington Post, and also established the White House Office of Digital Strategy. Each one of these talented digital communicators have had enormous tasks over the last few months. We all know it because we felt it too. Because of them, many of our offices were able to get out information to help the American people when they actually needed it the most. So today, I hope everybody that's tuning in will be able to take away some of those best practices and pivots from the last few months from our esteemed panel of guests. So let's cue the virtual applause, of course. Thank you so much for coming and joining me today. I want to start a little bit more broadly with our discussion. I know many of the folks listening to this call are communicators, and they have to wear many different hats, not only through the COVID season, but beyond and now. And one of more of those hats, of course, is digital. So, Colleen, I want to start with you. We've talked at length about the differences between traditional comms and digital. And how have you seen those differences come to fruition over the last 6 months?
Sure. Well, I think that the primary difference is, in terms of, of comms coming from the state of New York, every communication channel has the same message, and we're taking the governor's words or the health commissioner's words, and we are sharing them and finding ways to amplify them through whatever means possible. And so digital, it's just really remembering to simplify the message and to think about how it's going to be heard by regular people as opposed to being filtered by the press. And that's just always how we approach whatever we put on any of Governor Cuomo's social or digital channels, is just thinking about the person who's hearing it and knowing that that's someone who's home, who's probably scared, who has a lot of questions, and is just really looking for direct information as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Kind of those differences between the spin of, putting traditional comms out there, you send out a press release, versus on digital, it's kind of like you're just speaking to the people.
Exactly. We always think about who is hearing this message and what do they need to know.
Absolutely. So, Ernestine, I know many times in digital, we're kind of the first people to ever have these types of roles in our offices. Can you talk a little bit about being the first ever digital director for Muriel Bowser?
Of course. Thank you guys for allowing me to be here today first. I think the one thing that was very daunting coming into that experience was that there was no blueprint. And I think for most of us who've done digital, we've probably done them with no blueprint. You had no one to ask a question to. You had to basically figure it out as you go. And I think that's what makes us all unique as digital communicators. So coming into that role, especially as the first person, the one thing I will say is that I did have the White House to look to. And that was one of the things the mayor did say to us. She was like, I want to do digital like President Obama does digital. And I was like, yay. But also I was like, okay, how do I do that? So I did have that at least as a guide in a sense, to figure out what I need to do, how do I need to do it, and what was the best channels that we had available as a city to effectuate that kind of plan. But we made it work, and to this day, they're still doing awesome things. So I'm really glad that I was able to kind of pave that way for everyone else that came behind me.
Of course. And now you kind of see that in your role now, being able to pave the way for folks and stuff like that too. I know for all of us, not only on the panel, but in the call in general, many of us have been the first people in our roles. I know I've been the first person in a couple of digital roles that I've had, and I know that's probably the case for many of the people listening today. So it's good to hear that you can lean on others and, also try to forge your own path. Caleb, often roles in the digital world typically come through by word of mouth. People tap you, people ask you questions, people ask you to do the job. Can you tell us about kind of how you've navigated through all of the different leaders and kind of how you got to each one of them? Because I know that a lot of it has been through the same way that many of us have gotten our digital roles.
Yeah, the digital space is not different from any other space in DC, and a lot of it is networking, a lot of it is the people you know and the timing and whatnot. For me, I had friends in John Boehner's office, and I had a friend who was kind of doing a lot of the digital and photographic role there, and he was looking to transition to the campaign side, and so they reached out to me directly, and that went exactly like that. And then as Boehner transitioned out of the speakership and Speaker Ryan came in, they asked me to stay, which was a little bit unusual. We only had a handful of people from that team who stayed from Boehner to Ryan. So I'm really blessed and honored that happened. And then sort of the same thing happened whenever Speaker Ryan left. Leader McCarthy asked me to come and join his team. So it's been a series of sort of relationships. And I know the ladies would agree that if you are doing good work, then people will see it and people will pick up on it. And that's really what it matters a lot more than, the happy hours or whatever are fine. Those are obviously a lot less important these days. What really matters is doing work day in and day out, being consistent, hitting for singles every day.
Absolutely. I got a piece of advice once. You're always auditioning for your next role. So it seems like that's the case here and probably the case for many folks listening too. Ernestine, Colleen, I know that you guys have both had similar experiences, kind of, doing really good work and then being tapped to be in your roles. And I was wondering if, Colleen, I want you to kind of explain how that's progressed through your career. And I know you've had some amazing stops along the way. Just kind of highlighting that for us would be awesome.
Okay. So yeah, I started my career as a journalist and working in more traditional media and newspapers, magazines, broadcast television. And when I started working in digital, well, as you mentioned, my first sort of digital job was when I was working for magazine Us Weekly. Our owner decided that we should have a website and was just like, hey, we need a website. And no one else had a website. So there wasn't a huge, no one on staff knew how to do that. So I got to do that pretty much. But after that, I went over to AOL, where my job was figuring out how to create original content for the web. When I started there, and all of the content that you would see across this vast network with over 50 million users a day was pickups from magazines that they had contracts with. So, I kind of sat back and was like, okay, I think that really the difference between the web and any other kind of information source is there's a lot of words that you don't understand about how to get it up there, but people are interested in the same thing. People are interested in being entertained. They're interested in being informed. They're interested in being connected. And so rather than looking for people who had various kinds of digital experience, I just brought in a ton of journalists and, taught them the tricks that I had quickly learned. Excuse me. And then, my entire team got fired one day because AOL bought the Huffington Post and decided they wouldn't do original content anymore. They would use the Huffington Posts. So I got a call that afternoon from the White House because I had worked with them on some projects when Michelle Obama was launching some of her projects. And I think, we talked about that the other day, digital or any kind of job, really, you will really find all of your opportunities from people who who you've worked with, who liked the work that you did, who maybe learned something from you and thought you could teach them something. And that's, that's always been the case for me, whatever industry that I've been in. And yeah, so that was getting a call to come, help launch an Office of Digital Strategy for the White House was unexpected. They didn't really have one before. And everything there was new. Everything we did had never been done before. And that's not saying that previous administrations hadn't been thinking of it. Every day new tools were available, and you try to figure out how to use them. And I think that probably anyone in civic is doing this all the time and thinking about, oh, here's a cool new way to talk to people. Does that make sense for me? And the answer isn't always yes, but I think that you kind of owe it to your community to take a minute and evaluate and think about how you could do that. And does this offer you new opportunities that you haven't done before? Although that's not the question that you asked.
You know, it's something that's really important to think about too, kind of being that digital trailblazer, kind of forging new paths, thinking about all of these things is really important for us here. And then, of course, all the folks listening as well. So Ernestine, I know one thing that you mentioned to me was kind of the differences between when you started out and how you've been here, you know, with the caucus, and how kind of honing in on one sort of skill set is important. I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
Of course. So when I started out, well, before I even started out doing digital, I actually was a courtroom clerk here in DC. So I was on the path of actually going to law school. And I actually had just finished my first year of law school and was trying to debate whether or not I was going to go back to law school. And so I had done some volunteering. I'd been volunteering across different political campaigns since college. And I had the opportunity to volunteer in Northern Virginia in 2012. And they really liked how I was there every day, 7 days a week, helping out, making phone calls. And they offered me the job to come and be a field organizer in Northern Virginia. And I was kind of like, of course, I want to do this. And so that was along the time where they were actually asking field organizers to use Facebook to kind of get volunteers excited about the campaign. And so they were just toying with the idea, not really sure of how it was going to work, but trying to figure out, okay, how can we do this? And so that's how I actually entered digital, being able to all the things that I was curious about to actually apply it in my work. And so that's how I actually got into the digital field. And I think across the board for me, no matter what position I've gone to, I'm sure as my esteemed colleagues will tell you, every time you do a digital job, you're doing something else differently. So where you start off and maybe you start off just doing graphic design, and then the next job, oh, they have a priority of video. So you're doing more video. And then the next job has a priority of doing more strategy and storytelling. That's what you're doing. And what I have appreciated is across every position I've held, I was able to perfect one skill set or another. So now I think I am kind of where I am supposed to be in my digital journey. I am now I am an expert when it comes to digital strategy and digital engagement and helping people to figure out, here's your issue. Here's how you get people to engage with that issue, and let's build a campaign around it, right? And so, but it took me a journey to get there because I had to do every part of a digital job. Just like Colleen, I had to figure out, okay, how do you build a website? What does that all entail, right? And so in doing every portion of a digital job, I learned where, not even so much where I was comfortable, where I could hone my skill, and I saw what was needed at the time. And so I think as I've projected and gone up and through, I've seen, especially in this time that we're in right now, strategy and engagement is important because now everyone's sitting at home. They're always on their phones. They're always on their laptops, and they're being inundated with so much content. And so now it's, how do you make that engaging content for them to actually pay attention to? And so this is where my expertise is really just coming out in full force all over the place for the caucus and our members, because they all need to figure that out. And so we need to figure it out together.
Absolutely. You know, this is that time to kind of figure it out, figure out where you're going to put things. So along the same vein, let's switch gears and talk about our journey from March until now. We all know that coronavirus has been really hard on all of us, but there's some key things that I think it's really important for us as communicators to talk about. So Caleb, I want to start with you. When we chatted about this, you talked about coronavirus in stages. And I'm wondering how you compare the early days of getting out messages and communicating to now.
Yeah, a lot's changed. You guys can look at your own lives and realize, you're in a different stage of buying toilet paper than you were on day one, right? So the same thing is true for digital communications. Those early days were really hard to get information. We were all sort of just waiting for news to be breaking, for announcements from the White House, for, congressional activity had largely slowed. We weren't meeting as a conference or even as a Congress. So those early days were a lot of, for us as on the Republican side, a lot of echoing whatever was coming from the administration, the CDC, the FDA, those sorts of things, just to try to help amplify sort of medical and health related things. And then as time gave way to May, we had our own legislative battles, and those continue to go on. And then sort of the typical partisan rancor that you maybe are used to from Washington, D.C. has come and frothed up at the top. But, we've also gone through a bit of a period of where we're trying to be both informative and entertaining. We've released some videos on Operation Warp Speed. So we're trying to educate people on our own network. So it's not just depending on other people to put out content and reverberating those things, but it's also creating original content for ourselves. As all of this will change as we get inch closer and closer to election day. But there has definitely been a series of stages. And so from a digital perspective, the most important thing is to remain flexible, having a content calendar and having ideas about what you want to do and being able to plan ahead for large projects or large, maybe video products, things like that, things that take more time is a great idea. But as long as you're able to be flexible in this news environment, that's been a big takeaway for us.
That's so important. The flexibility with others, with even different modes of communication, things like that. Speaking of modes of communication, Colleen, the world needs to know about these PowerPoints. Tell me about them. How did they come about? What's the process used to make them? We're all super curious. I know I am. Tell us all about it.
Well, I mean, Governor Cuomo has always loved a PowerPoint. He loves the the tool really of being able to present your information and to focus attention on specific words or themes or images that he thinks will help people understand the narrative and what he wants to tell them. So, if you were watching our live streams this time last year, you would have seen a different kind of PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint process is we had a template. And I think it's probably would be surprising to people to know just how involved the governor is in the final product. So, in March, April, May, it was kind of, we would know the day in advance, maybe, that we were going to be wanting to talk about a new announcement about PPE or a new field hospital. And so that would be something that we would, the overall communications team would sort of make sure that the PowerPoint team would have the data and people would start building slides. But, a lot of those PowerPoints got put together we would get the numbers probably at 5:00 in the morning. And then he would start his press conferences basically at 11:30. And mostly the PowerPoints were still being changed, just updated with new information, 11:15, 11:20. It's a very small team that is in the actual PowerPoint simply because you want to, obviously maintain the integrity of your versions. But yeah, I don't really think anybody on a communications team would be like, I think the slide needs to say, you are wrong, right? That just comes from him and he can say that.
Well, you heard it here. The world did want to know. And now we know that Governor Cuomo just in general loves PowerPoints. So that's something fun. And, that's really important when you're thinking about talking about different principles and thinking about that. Caleb, how do you determine what success looks like for your principal?
Well, there are a lot of offices in politics, probably especially, that success is if the principal's happy. And I'm not saying that's the wrong measure, but it's certainly not the only measure. For us, we're a very data-driven organization, and so we're constantly measuring and comparing. Okay, how does this message work? How does this timing work? How does this method of delivery? How does this network compare to what we're seeing over here? And it's an iterative process, right? I think everybody would agree in the digital space that you are constantly just trying to improve a little bit on the last thing that you did. When I sit down and meet with people who maybe are considering a career in digital, I just try to encourage them that if you are producing a video or taking a photo, and if in 6 months from now you don't look back and think about that video or that photo or that graphic with disgust because it's just junk, then that means that's a good thing. That means you're growing. That means you're getting better at your craft. And so success for us is, it's engagement, it's growth. Our target audience is not always maybe the American public at large. He's a congressman from California first. And so sometimes success may mean small numbers, but it's geo-targeted to the right people. We also respond first and foremost to our Republican members because those are the people who put him in the position of leadership. And so that's a much smaller constituency of about 200 people that we are hyper-focused on a lot of the time. So success is, it depends on what the message is, but as Colleen mentioned earlier, your audience has to come first. So you consider your audience first, and then you figure out what those metrics are.
Absolutely. And Ernestine, I know you're no stranger to dealing with an entire caucus of folks. Actually, the New York Times featured all of your work that you did early on in coronavirus. So can you talk about how you were able to communicate with all those members during your stand-up meetings and sort of that process and how you've been able to iterate on it, kind of engaging with that core audience?
Of course. So in those meetings, the goal was to figure out a way to take our standing weekly caucus meeting and provide the members with a platform to still not only communicate with each other, but also share information with each other. And so one of the very first tasks I was given when I came on as digital director was to figure out how to do this as a caucus, how to do caucus calls during the August recess. So this is August 2019. And so we had to figure out how to do that and how to make that work because the members still need to know they still need to have a way to communicate with each other. So when we got to COVID and the goal became, okay, now how do we get them all to communicate? And I was like, we already have a plan. It's simple. We just do our caucus calls, right? We just do the conference calls, right? Little did I know that, as the article said, they would be the bright light for the members. I took it as I was fulfilling my duty to ensure that they had a way to share the information with one another, still have a way to meet with one another. But it became something other than that for them. And I'm really happy that we were able to do that. And to make, as Caleb mentioned, able to be flexible. So we had to figure out not only how to do it, how we had normally done it, but do it quite differently. And as I said, how do you take an in-person event and make it virtual, especially on the phone? Those are two different dynamics that I didn't think about at first when I was first doing this, but now we have to figure out, okay, if we want to have a meeting with the White House and the Vice President and the COVID-19 team, how does that work, right? So it was very much us being flexible. It was very much us already using some things that were already in our toolkit to do this, especially as Colleen mentioned, for their core audience. And in this situation, the core audience was the members. So figuring how that works for them and making it as seamless and easy for them to continue to carry out and do their duty was what I was going for there. And I promise nothing more.
Well, it's always awesome to highlight good work being done by folks. I know we're a little bit over time, but our conversation is just so compelling that I have a few more questions for you all. Colleen, sometimes the tech that we have in government can be a challenge. How are you and your team able to navigate those restraints and get information out to people?
So I think maybe you're referring to a challenge that New York State had, which we were aware of, but it really came full circle in March when 2 of our websites were built on really old platforms that needed code pushes to update them, which was the Department of Health and the Department of Labor, which is where people were coming for information about UI and about COVID. So we quickly we kind of mirrored the look of those, but we built websites that lived on, a newer Drupal site that we could update. And we programmed that to look as if it was, the Department of Health and the Department of Labor, because we just couldn't, we needed to change information within seconds and hours, and not, you didn't want to kind of call in a developer just to change a number. So you just kind of have to make do and figure out how you're going to use the tools that you have to address the needs that have come up. In other situations, we had to really reach New Yorkers everywhere. And we know, and you all know, that not everybody, as much as we'd like to think it, not everybody is following an elected official's social media. They're just not, especially not people who you're trying to reach in different communities. So, we were trying to think of how you could use digital to find the best ways to reach people. So we called the largest home delivery companies in New York, like DoorDash and Fresh Direct, and we asked them to print out flyers that gave information on how to protect yourself and your family from coronavirus in every delivery they made, whether it was on a pizza box or in a bag of groceries. So you just really have to think where the people are that you want to talk to and how to best find them, and kind of put aside, you're like, well, of course it should all come through the official channel. But when it comes to something like public health, every channel is good if it finds people where they are.
Absolutely. Finding people where they are, being creative. I feel like that's a huge piece. Ernestine, jumping off of that, how have you determined what mediums have been the most effective, or the channels that you're going to put things out on over the last 6 months? And how has it differed from before?
Of course. So before, it definitely was different. Piggybacking off of what Caleb said, we definitely looked at the analytics. We looked at where the people are. We looked at all of our social media platforms to figure out, okay, we have people here, here, and here. These are the demographics. Here's where we want to push the information. But since COVID, we've understood and realized we have to do it dramatically different. For instance, with our live events, we used to stream them first on Facebook. And now we have pivoted during COVID to stream them first on YouTube. And we had to make that choice for a lot of different reasons. But the primary reason is, at first, the main reason was we only want to target a certain group of people. And so we know that we have a certain group of people that are already going to be tuned in on Facebook, no matter what. Now we understand that we need to be able to target people all over the country, because they want to know what we are doing in Congress for them. And so we pivot from Facebook to YouTube, and that was perfect, right? And then also because the Capitol has also been limited in even letting reporters into the building, we needed to also figure out, how do we allow the media to also be a part of these events? And so again, YouTube was also another perfect fit for those two audiences. And so for us, we did have to kind of like figure out where that was, how that was, and do the pivot. So now we stream live events on YouTube. We still stream them on Twitter, and then we'll upload them to Facebook later. But we had to make that decision because we understood our audience was different in the age of COVID.
Absolutely. And using the live best practices that Andrea presented, no less. So that's really, it makes me happy to hear, but also, YouTube is a great place to get information out to people. You're kind of leaving people on the table if you don't, utilize it. So that's really great to hear. And I think that, kind of taking some lessons from each one of you and kind of piecing that together as we go forward is something that I think is really important when we think about communicating, when we think about where we are in the pandemic and how that's shaping up to be not only for the past 6 months, but also as we go into 2021. So all interesting stuff, but I'm going to have us close out with a lightning round. I promised you guys a lightning round. So here it is. First question, last thing you searched on Google. Caleb, let's start with you.
We just launched a website last week, so I'm constantly making sure that our search terms are reaching to the top of the list. So commitment to America, that's a plug, but it's also a true thing. That's the last thing I searched, which is the #1 result, commitmenttoamerica.com on Google.
Amazing. Ernestine?
So funny thing, I usually present at South by Southwest every year. And so they just put out the announcement about how they're going to do South by Southwest online next year. So when I saw that announcement, I immediately Googled it to see what does that mean for me potentially presenting in 2021.
That's awesome. Love that. Colleen?
Not as cool as Ernestine's. I'm afraid mine was, what is the last day that you can register for in-person voting in the state of New York?
Ooh, plug. Happy National Voter Registration Day. All of you make sure to register to vote. Get other people to vote. Most of you work in politics already, so I'm sure you all are registered, of course. All right, next question. Best non-work related YouTube channel. Colleen, let's start with you.
You know what, since COVID and not being able to travel anywhere, I'm spending a lot of time watching live safari drives from and beyond.
Ooh, love that. Caleb?
For me, it would be probably Casually Explained. I love like sort of irreverent, informative, and entertaining videos. But if I'm being honest, I have a 2.5-year-old. And so whatever channel is streaming Peppa Pig at any given moment is the winner.
Of course, of course. Peppa Pig, Paw Patrol, just switch between. Ernestine, what about you?
So I recently purchased a home, and so I have been looking at a lot of DIY channels. So my favorite one thus far is Exo McKenna. I really love her. So I'm always looking at all of her. Yeah, and Lone Fox, he's a really good one too. So I'm always looking at those two channels like every day when I want to calm down at the end of my day.
Ooh, I need some of that advice as well. Love DIY stuff. Okay, last lightning round question. Okay, best COVID activity. Ernestine, we're starting with you.
The best COVID activity, I have to say, are the conference calls. I really love engaging with the members. So I really love getting those set up for them and then having our conversations before they start the call, checking in on what the grandkids are doing and all of that. They tell me their funny stories about their grandkids imitating me, saying, "You are now live." So I really love that. So I have to say that's it for me.
I love it. Colleen?
You know what? I have to say that the one thing that I've loved since the season of COVID here in New York is outdoor dining and turning the streets into public spaces.
Oh, just the big dining areas with the little lights. So cute. Caleb, take us home.
From a work perspective, the schedule agrees with me. I'm a night owl, and so not having to physically be present in the office for most mornings is just great because I get a lot of work done at night. From a personal perspective, that 2.5-year-old that I mentioned, she and I go for a walk every single day, and we get the mail, and that's when we have some of our best conversations.
Oh, that's really cute. I love that. Well, thank you all so much for imparting your wisdom on us, giving us some best tips and tricks. I know that, we have to all be creative during this time, and listening to the things that you guys have all done is really inspiring, and also gives me some things to write down in my notebook. So I'm sure that all of the folks on here enjoyed our panel as well. So thank you guys so much. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to our countdown to the election. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Secretary Padilla, Congressman Will Hurd, folks from our Civics Outreach team, Eric and Andrea, as well as our esteemed panelists that you just heard from straight away. So thank you so much for joining us. This is our last virtual training series before the election. So come back to the same channel after Election Day. I know most of you are heads down with all the things that you have to work on until November 3rd. Of course, today is National Voter Registration Day, so make sure you register to vote and get others to register to vote as well. Make sure you claim your knowledge panel and make sure that you get your voice heard to all your constituents. So thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.